Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's Blockchain and Innovation Circle. For those who might not know me yet, my name is Gazime Shatiri. I'm part of the team at the Office for Financial Market Innovation and Digitalization, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's big session. First, I know we have end of January already, but since it's the first big session of the year, I would like to take the opportunity and wish you all a healthy and successful 2025. I hope you had all a great start in the new year. So today's big title is From Concept to Reality, How Tokenization is Transforming Finance. Tokenization is a topic that was already discussed in past big sessions from different angles. However, if we look at the developments in the field, we also see major financial institutions, amongst others, the biggest asset managers in the world, actively pushing for mass adoption of tokenized assets. It makes it particularly worthwhile and interesting to revisit the topic and discuss latest trends. To do so, we have two distinguished guests from Sygnum Bank with us today. We have Fatmire Bekiri, who is head of tokenization at Sygnum. And also we have Joshua Taucher, who is legal counsel at Sygnum. In the end, we'll have time for questions. So please feel free to drop your question, if you have one, in the chat throughout the session. And yeah, I think I would love to hand over to Josh. Josh, the stage is yours. Feel free.
Thanks a lot for the introduction and a warm welcome from us. It's a pleasure to be here. So as Sima mentioned, so the topic today is from concept to reality, how tokenization is transforming. Objective of the presentation is kind of a three-step approach. So first we want to introduce Sygnum a bit, just that you know who we are, what do we do, and then how we approach tokenization at Sygnum. And then we will do a deep dive into a specific case to give you a bit kind of a step-by-step process on how we tackle a tokenization project. What do you need to consider when tokenizing something? What are the questions? Things like that. So really looking forward to this. Let's jump in. Maybe first an introduction of who is actually speaking here. Hand over to my colleague.
No, thanks a lot. So good afternoon, everyone. Also warm welcome to today's webinar from my side. My name is Fatmire Bekiri and I lead the tokenization department at Sygnum since more than 3.5 years already. And so my responsibilities include overseeing the strategic positioning and delivery of our products and services in the field of tokenization. Before this role, I worked in corporate finance and traditional banking for a few years. And on the academic side, I hold a master's degree in banking and finance from the University of Zurich. I look very much forward to guiding you through this webinar together with my colleague Josh.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in the legal team, legal counsel with Sygnum, about 2 years now. Part of my responsibilities is to provide legal advice to internal stakeholders, be this on the corporate, contractual or regulatory matters. We're working really closely with the tokenization team, so here we would advise on the structuring, regulatory questions, and kind of all aspects that come up from a legal perspective. Also do the legal project management with regards to tokenization topics. Previously to joining Sygnum, I was working as an attorney in a commercial law firm in Zurich in the banking and regulatory area. So kind of a smooth transition to the in-house position. So let's start, maybe some background on what Sygnum is. Here it's kind of an introduction from a regulatory perspective to show you. I think this also emphasizes Sygnum from the start had quite a strong focus on the regulatory compliant process, which I think for digital assets, now it's becoming more and more normal, but it has not been the case in the beginning. But for us, from day one, we focused on a regulatory compliant part, meaning we received the banking license in August 2019 in Switzerland, allowing us to perform or to provide all kind of banking and financial services in Switzerland. But Sygnum's heritage is not just in Switzerland, also in Singapore from the early days on, where we have a major payment institution license and a capital market services license, allowing us to provide services on the ground in Singapore. Maybe more interesting for this audience here, we're also active, becoming more and more active in the European Union and the EEA. We have a TVTG registration in Liechtenstein, which allows us kind of a simplified transition into a MiCAR CASP license. We're also active on a cross-border basis in Luxembourg, based on certain licenses and registrations. Last but not least, also the United Arab Emirates are where we can act through a branch. There as well, we have a permit that allows us to provide certain financial services. On the left-hand side, you see kind of the other perspective. So our clients' perspective, where do all our clients come from? You can see it's kind of a really global client base, although mainly or a large part of it is from Europe, but also a big focus in Asia and the rest of the world.
Here you see some facts and figures about Sygnum. So as you heard, at Sygnum, we are proud to serve a global client base of over 2,000 individuals and institutional clients. So our team consists approximately 270 dedicated professionals, and we currently have assets under custody exceeding $5 billion. So let me walk you also through our core offerings. So what you see on the right-hand side, so custody and staking in the middle of this cube. So we provide secure custody solution for digital assets alongside a staking service to help our clients generate additional yield on their holdings. Then we provide also trading and credit and lending services. So we facilitate the trading of a wide range of crypto assets. And in addition, our credit and lending services allow clients to leverage the digital assets as collateral to unlock liquidity in efficient. We have also our own asset management arm. So through this department, we design investment opportunities that provide our clients with exposure into crypto and digital assets. And then you see on the underlying level of the cube, so B2B services. So for our institutional partners such as Post Finance or Sugar Cantonal Bank, we deliver also the digital asset banking solutions so via our platform, so they can offer these kind of services through our platform. And we provide also comprehensive digital asset compliance services to support their operations. And last but not least, tokenization services, but we will delve deeper into this topic shortly. So when we speak about tokenization, from my perspective, there are two, let's say, main drivers. On the one hand side, you have the powerful infrastructure, the blockchain technology, and on the other side, the legal regulatory framework that allows us to operate in a full compliant way. So these slides provide comprehensive overview of our services and platforms. So we began to develop our own tokenization solution back in 2018-19 on Ethereum with a clear goal in mind to offer an end-to-end tokenization solution. So what do we mean by an end-to-end tokenization solution? So our goal was to have a primary market, but also custody, and a secondary market for the tokens to be traded. Our offering goes beyond just the technical issuance of the token. So we actively also support our clients with the legal structuring of the tokens, ensuring that their needs are met in a compliant and efficient manner. Additionally, as a regulated entity, so under our banking license, we can also operate a secondary market, which you see on the left-hand side. So the secondary market is built on a smart contract base. So which automates the transaction validation. So the smart contract ensures that one party holds the required assets while the other has the means of payment, all executed securely on-chain. And to enable this process, we launched our settlement token, the DCHF, which is an important part of our tokenization ecosystem at Sygnum. On the lower left corner of the slide, you see the key verticals where we believe we can create significant value for our clients. So we have private markets, traditional security, and art and collectibles. I will elaborate on these verticals later in this presentation and walk you through different cases that we delivered in each of them.
So maybe first just a kind of a high level, some words on the legal framework that allows tokenization. And Switzerland, like Liechtenstein, was an early mover in this area. So Switzerland in 2021, the DLT Act entered into force. Unlike the name might imply, in Switzerland, the DLT Act was not kind of one comprehensive legal or piece of legislation, but rather with this DLT Act came certain specific amendments of existing laws. So there's no one law that you can check and find all the answers, but you have to know which section of existing laws, like the Code of Obligation, Financial Services Act, or the Banking Act, were amended slightly. Main innovation that came with the DLT Act is the introduction of the ledger-based security. This is also the vessel that we use for tokenization projects. Besides that, DLT trading facilities were introduced and clear rules for the segregation of assets in the case of a bankruptcy of a custodian. I think this was something that put Switzerland, with the clarity of this framework, put Switzerland on center stage. Liechtenstein, on the other hand, was even earlier than Switzerland, with the TVTG law entering into force in 2021, so a year ahead of Switzerland. In my understanding, Liechtenstein had a bit of a different approach than Switzerland. So the TVTG law is kind of a one comprehensive piece of legislation that covers token-related topics. And this introduced the token container model, kind of a comprehensive solution for tokenization projects. And then we also have the MiCAR kind of coming into the picture, entering into force end of last year in the European Union. And then I think in the next couple of days, this will be implemented into local law. So both jurisdictions you see allow for tokenization, and I think it's still are giving a lot of clarity to also not just the legal professional, but also for other market participants to follow through with tokenization projects like the one we'll present in a moment. So as mentioned, ledger-based security as the vessel for tokenization. So what is a ledger-based security? It's a new form of security that was introduced with the DLT Act and basically consists of three things. It's a right. Can be what kind of the content of this right can be, we'll see afterwards. But basically, it's the right that is connected via a registration agreement with a token or with an informational unit of any kind. Basically, it's a technology neutral definition that you see here. So it's not blockchain specific, but this right is connected to the informational unit via the registration agreement. And then you have the securities ledger, but again, not technology specific, but rather technology neutral. There's certain requirements that such a register or such a ledger has to fulfill, but they're less specific to the blockchain in general. This we'll go into more detail afterwards on how you structure it, but just as a kind of an intro to what is the vessel used for tokenization in Switzerland.
So far we saw our platform and the technology behind the legal framework. And now let's move on with projects that we delivered in each vertical. So starting with private markets, so we successfully implemented the project with Hamilton Lane and Apex, where two new DLT-based share classes were launched within an existing fund of Hamilton Lane in Luxembourg. Apex, as the transfer agent of the fund, is now managing these share classes seamlessly through our on-chain platform. Additionally, in collaboration with Float and Fosonara, also in the private markets vertical, we launched a mezzanine note, so debt on-chain, providing investors with exposure to private debt. Moving on to the next vertical, so in the traditional security space, we partnered with Fidelity International to launch a money market fund on ZK Sync Arrow. So further showcasing our capabilities to bridge traditional financial instruments with blockchain technology. And finally, I'd like to highlight what is arguably our most well-known project. I would say this is the tokenization of a Picasso painting, which we will explore in greater depth today. So as said, so we will do now a deep dive on the Picasso tokenization case that we did a few years ago. So before launching the Picasso token, one of the key questions we had to address was how tokenization would be implemented. Initially, we considered launching, let's say, a single NFT to represent the ownership of the entire artwork. However, this approach had significant limitations, so it would not allow for liquidity or fractionalization. Moreover, fractionalization through NFTs, which you see in the middle, would have posed challenges for secondary market transactions. So if a token is not fungible, so you can then also not easily trade it. So a prerequisite of tradability in a secondary market is, as said, fungibility. And this analysis led us to explore the last option, which you see on the slide, is the art security token as a more suitable solution for our goal. So these tokens are fungible and represent co-ownership in the artwork. So their fungible also nature enables liquidity and facilitates trading on the secondary market. So addressing the limitations of the NFTs that we saw earlier. Once the tokenization model was clear, so we knew we're going to do an art security token, fractionalization, fungible, we shifted our focus on other critical aspects. So it's not just about tokenization. So it was essential really to remember that this initiative was not just about, bringing ownership on chain. It was about creating a valuable investment product. So this required us to address other key factors, including valuation of the artwork, custody, insurance, and so on and so forth. In the case of the Picasso artwork, so when it comes to valuation, so multiple independent valuation were conducted by accredited professionals from the Appraisers Association of America. The painting was custodized securely with a professional custodian here in Switzerland with Möbeltransport, and Artemundi, an asset manager, assumed the responsibility as the art manager. So their duties were mainly like they make sure that the artwork is properly insured, custodized, and so on and so forth. So to ensure clarity and accountability among all these roles, so responsibilities were formalized within a robust legal framework. This comprehensive approach allowed us to create a secure and tradable investment product backed by a sound tokenization, valuation, custody, and management practice.
So let's have a closer look at this legal framework. So what are some questions that you would have when you start a tokenization project? I think the first that comes to mind, it might sound quite obvious, but the first one is kind of what exactly do you want to tokenize? And from experience, I think a lot of times there's kind of one might have an idea, okay, it's going to be this and this, but then when you really drill down on the details, which right, which claim, how do you want to structure it, this is then, it brings a lot of clarity to a project, but it's also not always easy, even though it sounds kind of an obvious, like an obvious question in the beginning. Once you have clarity on that, other questions would arise about who is involved, what kind of parties are involved, what are their roles. We heard custodian, insurers, people who appraise it, and how do you interlink them contractually? What is needed on that side? What kind of obligations do parties have? What kind of duties? What kind of rights? And this will also be need to figure out. Another point that's quite important is, do you have any mechanisms that can deal with unexpected changes? So let's assume you have 3 parties involved, and one of these parties goes bankrupt in the process of the investment. How do you deal with that? Or another thing that might be unexpected could be that you get an offer from a third party that is really good, but it's happening before the end of the investment horizon. And here, I mean, the easiest way to deal with unexpected changes is to prepare for it and to, for example, allow the token holders to vote on certain questions. So we always are really close to what the majority wants. All the questions arise on the safeguarding of the object at hand. So do you need to insure it? If so, how? Who has to pay for it? What kind of custodian do you choose? Where is the object stored? And then more towards the investment horizon and the investment details. How do you want to structure an exit? Of course, you might think, okay, let's say after 5 years we sell the Picasso. If it really is fixed on 5 years, you might end up in a bad market, and then that's not optimal. So you typically would add a certain time frame that allows for some flexibility to find the best buyer and the best price for the manager to sell the project, Picasso. Also, do you want to allow for an early exit? So before the end of the investment horizon, as mentioned in this example, if someone approaches you with a really good offer, do you want to allow for this? How do you allow for it? So is there a voting? Typically, you would go through a voting and then you would have to have certain majorities. Do you want to foresee drag-along rights, squeeze-out rights? So here, I think questions are similar to shareholders' agreements. You always kind of face similar issues, but it's really important to think about those in the beginning, and then this allows for a smooth process afterwards. Besides these points, of course, there's also kind of who should be eligible as an investor for this project. What kind of documents do you need to prepare? Do you need to have a prospectus, or is a PPM sufficient? Tax perspectives as well, always an important topic. Also, the secondary markets, do you want to allow a secondary market or not? There's kind of plenty of legal questions arising in such a project. So we saw the first question is kind of what exactly do we want to tokenize? And this, here, of course, you have the limit, the legal limit, what you can tokenize. So let's have a closer look on what you can actually tokenize under Swiss law. And basically, under Swiss law, you can tokenize everything that could have been previously securitized as a negotiable security. That is a Wertpapier in German, and everything that could have been put in a negotiable security, you can also put into a ledger-based security. So for claims, that's an easy one. You can issue claims as ledger-based securities. The fungibility of the depicted right here is not a prerequisite for its design as a ledger-based security. And it's not just asset tokens that you can tokenize, but also utility tokens, as well as stable coins, always to the extent that the stable coin represents a claim towards the issuer. So for example, Bitcoin, where you do not have this counterparty, there is no claim, so that could not be issued as a ledger-based security, at least in a pure form. How about membership rights? They can only be issued as ledger-based securities to the extent that the law provides for this option. And this is only at the moment foreseen for membership rights in corporations, so Aktiengesellschaften and Kommanditgesellschaften. And now with regards to the Picasso painting, more interesting here, rights in Rem, which in German is called dingliche Rechte. They can also, again, only be issued to the extent that they could also be issued as a negotiable security or an uncertificated security. And this here in Switzerland, we have kind of a numerus clausus, so only Schuldbriefe and Einleinstitel mit Grundpfandrecht, so something really specific, could be tokenized as dingliche Rechte. So you might ask, how could you then tokenize a Picasso painting, a physical painting? Because the law does not provide for a direct tokenization of the ownership rights in physical objects. And this, there's a solution to this, and we will have a closer look on the next slide. So how did we do it? Basically, taking one step back, Swiss property law kind of follows the causality principle, meaning for transfer of ownership to happen, you need to have a Verpflichtungsgeschäft, also known as a causa. So there has to be some kind of contract, can be oral or written. And then to transfer the ownership, you also have to have a Verfügungsgeschäft, the traditio. So you have to dispose of the object. In an example, if we have a pen and I want to sell you that pen, there should be a contract, meaning, okay, I sell you the pen for 1 Swiss franc. But to transfer ownership, you also need to transfer the possession of the pen. So I would need to transfer the pen to you. That ownership goes over to the buyer. So we see for a typical case, it's the transfer of the possession of the underlying. So how can you do it with something that's a physical object without the transfer of ownership? So there's a solution to that, and it's called traditio longa mano. So that's a technical term, basically from the Latin, that it comes through a transfer via a long hand. And here on the example, you see that it's a 3-party system where you have the token holder. And what's tokenized in that sense is the implied instruction from token holder 1 to the custodian. The custodian holds in possession the Picasso painting. He's not the owner, but he holds it in possession on behalf of token holder 1. And when you transfer the token, it's kind of an implied instruction to the custodian that going forward, the custodian should hold the Picasso painting or part of the Picasso painting for the new owner, the token holder 2 in this case. And thereby you can also transfer ownership via a token under Swiss law. I think if I see that correctly, in Liechtenstein, you would not need this construct and could directly go through this token container model and thereby kind of saving this part. So Swiss law is in that regard a bit more tricky, but still it allows for this flexibility if you're creative enough.
So as we worked on this project, we had to address several edge cases to ensure robustness and viability. So for instance, we considered scenarios where there might be a new offering for the underlying asset, or a case where a token holder could potentially acquire almost all tokens through the secondary market. So this led us to carefully think through the mechanisms such as squeeze outs and drag-alongs. Another example we examined was the situation of a single token holder. Would it be, for example, possible for them to request a physical delivery of the underlying asset during the investment period? So these were just a few of the critical questions we tackled to build a comprehensive and secure framework to tokenize a masterpiece of Pablo Picasso. And after, I think, approximately 1.5 years after the launch of the Picasso token, a third party made an offer for the underlying asset that went directly to the art managers, Art Mundi, as you saw. So this offer was then presented to the token holders, followed by a voting process. And the voting, the majority of the token holder accepted the offer, and consequently, the underlying asset was released and proceeds were distributed among the token holders, and the tokens were subsequently burned. So this resulted in the end, from an investment perspective, 20% return for the investors. So this use case that we just presented, so a complete end-to-end investment case executed entirely on-chain, it was not only a significant milestone for us as a team, but also a momentum for the industry as a whole. With that, we reached the conclusion of the webinar, and I would like to invite you to join us for the Q&A session, where we would be happy to discuss any questions and thoughts you might have. Thank you.
Fatih and Josh, thank you so much. It was super interesting to see like the whole how the different stages that you go through in a tokenization project, and especially also the nitty-gritty details from a legal perspective that you have to consider. Maybe I start off with the first question. I mean, you talked about different projects across private markets and traditional securities and art, etc. How do you see, like, what do you think in like 3 to 5 years? Where will we be with like institutional adoption? With the like, yeah, how will this evolve in your opinion?
I think to make any prediction, you must be crazy a bit to do it, and to do it in our space even more. So I think you have to be a bit, yeah, let's say. Anyway, so my prediction is that as we see more and more institutions coming into it, and I think we will see more standardization being on the legal regulatory side on a global level. I think this is also needed to progress. I think we will see also a huge progress on the technology side. I mean, as powerful as blockchain might be, I think we have still there's some homework to do to be more scalable and more efficient. So I believe that there we will see a lot of progress and innovation happening. And I believe also it's not going to be just a one infrastructure. I think there will be multiple, and just the best will survive. And it depends also again on the use case. On the institutional side, I think if we put these puzzle pieces together with standardization on the legal regulatory side, but also on the technology side, this would also, let's say, make it easier for institutions to join us, as we see it now with the BlackRocks and Fidelities and so on and so forth joining us. I think in 5 years, so this is maybe what I hope, that the end investor will not, let's say, care about where the investment is taking place, as we nowadays we don't question, we just make an investment, and we have to be convinced in what we invest. And I hope that we will also see this in the tokenization space with institutionals and professional investors. And yeah. Anything to add, Josh, from your side? Or?
No, I think I mean, from an institutional perspective, I guess also you mentioned it, the regulatory framework is really important. But I think here it helped. From experience, I can tell for Switzerland, but I assume also for Liechtenstein, to have legal clarity and to have a law that deals with this gives a lot of confidence to institutional investors. And it took some time. It might still take a lot of time. I think sometimes you always have to be a bit careful of when you're in the space, you want to move ahead and faster, but it takes time, be the legal side to get clarity on all aspects, but also the technology side that takes time to implement, because as you saw before, there's 4 or 5 people or entities involved, and their infrastructure needs to be ready and it needs to be operational, and I think that it takes time. So it's not something that happens from today to tomorrow, but it's something that's have been going on in the back now for some time. But I think it will also take some time for all the benefits of tokenization to fully impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have questions coming up in the chat. I start reading the one. So you wrote in the slide that the Picasso should be managed by a company and not by a private individual. Are there some law limitations? If I am the owner of one house in Zurich, I will not be able to approach a tokenization company like Sygnum to create tokens out of it.
Yeah, maybe we can start with this one. So law requirements, I think this is a company policy in that sense, that for us, it's easier to interact with the company. You have a bit more substance as well, typically with the company. So this was, I think, a company policy coming from there. And then with regards to one house, I guess it could be possible. What you always need to consider with tokenization projects, you saw it with the Picasso. I think if it's an asset that provides interest during the life cycle, might be more interesting. If not, the value needs to be substantial to make sense to tokenize it. For a house, yes, I guess it would depend on the house and the investment case, also on the business side. I think there's two related points, maybe as a remark on the legal side of tokenizing a house. The next question then deals as well with real estate. So there you also have a bit of a restriction with regards to the Grundbuch, so the ledger where you have to enter ownership of houses, which at least if you directly go into, let's say if you want to have direct ownership of the house, that will always be to a certain degree not a problem, but the hindrance in that sense. Of course, you can structure it in an indirect way by a company or something like that. But yeah, there's some limitations. So I think that's also why tokenization of real estate, even though it sounds really interesting, also the democratization aspect of it and the spreading of the amount that you can invest, I think that sounds really intuitive. But I think there's some legal aspects that might be hindering a full-scale tokenization of real estate, at least for the moment, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. Another question which popped up is I'm reading. Interesting full cycle Picasso token. Congrats, Fatih. First question: what other assets have you tokenized? Second question, maybe I read them through. Second question: what is the investor appetite for tokenized financial instruments? And third question: does Sygnum underwrite its tokenization projects?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the congrats. It was heavy lifting, not only for you, but also for the team. Also, congrats to them, whoever was involved in it, make it happen. So to your question, what other assets we have tokenized? So we tokenized also sculptures and other paintings to remain in the art and collectibles vertical. Then we tokenized equity on the Swiss law, debt instrument, and the money market fund, private equity. So these kind of things we did. So we tokenized also wine in the early days. So we started really with more, let's say, tangible assets, art and collectible wine, art, and so on and so forth, and then move more towards financial instruments. The appetite for our investors is, let me phrase it like this: so we would not do it if there was no appetite. I think we are out of this POC phase at Sygnum, at least. For us, it's really important, whatever we create, that it's an investable product. And as you heard, so we are a digital asset bank. So our clients, they are used to operate on chain, and they really appreciate if they can invest in products on chain and generate yield and get exposure to different asset classes. So we really see demand. But what I have also to highlight, that the addressable market is still small, I would say. But we are growing as the industry is growing. And as I said, so I think at some point the investor will only care about the returns and not where the investment sits. And your last question, so does Sygnum underwrite tokenization projects? No, we don't do that. So we really tokenize. We have a project. we bring it on chain, and we make it then available on our platform for investors. So there's no underwriting from our side.
Perfect. Thank you, Fatih. Another question is tokenization suitable for PV farms projects, renewable energy projects?
Yeah, so let me start, and maybe Josh can add some. So usually when we conduct a tokenization project, we start with the feasibility analysis. So for example, in this case, we would see where is this farm with anyway, I'm not familiar with this renewable energy project. Anyway, so we have then to consider where does it sit, how can we structure it, and assuming that there is a way to bring ownership rights on chain, and technically it's possible, then what we have also to consider is that there's demand for it. So that, as I said, we create an investment case. Would you put money in this kind of project? Is there demand? How long is the money locked up? And so on and so forth. I think these things we have also to consider beside the feasibility, because sometimes things are feasible, we can tokenize it, we can put it in a contractual framework. But our goal, I think the issuer's goal, but also our goal is to really create investment opportunities, for our investors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, I think
Hey, Josh, sorry.
I see Mr. Concept also had a previous question that might not have been addressed yet, or partially when we talked about. So where do you see the challenges and limitations of tokenization? It's quite a broad question. I think I'm not sure. I can go first with certain legal or regulatory perspectives, and then you want to join maybe. I think challenges from a legal or regulatory side, I think there's always, now we have the clarity, right? At least in Switzerland, Liechtenstein on that side, but there's still certain ongoing points. I mean, one could also be, let's say, stablecoin side of things. If you want to be fully on-chain, you would also have to have clarity on that, which in Switzerland is currently kind of a hot topic. And the other one is all these compliance-related questions. If you want to kind of use the full benefits of tokenization, and that implies opening up the pools of participants and moving funds around in an easier way. I think there you will always face certain challenges. It's possible from a legal side, but those are, I think, challenges. And there's also the challenge on the technical side. Let's say if you have a way to ID a party, and to properly ID it for, let's say, also for a standard of a bank, to KYC a client and then put that identity on chain, that would help a lot. I mean, there's certain solutions, but I think we still need a bit time for these to come through in a large scale.
Josh, maybe a linked question. So, I mean, we see now in the US, we have a pro-crypto president currently who pushes also the regulatory side of the crypto field. So if you have like, what is your ideal scenario? How this movement of regulatory certainty goes? Maybe like in Switzerland, but also in general. Like if you have like one ideal scenario, what is going to happen?
A free wish.
Yes, I gotta be honest, it's not an easy way to fix it, right? It has so many facets that play into this. I think what would help would be more and more standardization from a regulatory perspective, that you would have certain minimum thresholds, be this on the compliance side with regards to KYC, or on, I mean, even eligible investors. These are then topics that you have also beyond tokenization, right? If you act in not just in one jurisdiction, and there's plenty of there could be plenty of advantages if we find the different jurisdictions, as different countries find kind of a base, a minimum requirement for certain things. And if we have such a standard, I think this would allow tokenization, but yeah, I guess financial markets overall to move freer and faster, and also technical, like what constitutes a material outsourcing on the IT side, things like that. There's a standardization would help, but more I guess standardization can also hinder innovation. So I guess it would be more a minimum standards that people can apply. I think that would be the main thing. US, I guess, yes, you have now the open, or at least there's more positive vibe, I guess, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. What kind of rules do they implement? So I think, it's still an open picture.
Thank you so much. We had another question related to tokenization of real estate in the chat, and if you could talk about it in Switzerland and in the EU and the eligible investors. I think this it was pretty much also covered with the answer you gave before on the other question. I mean,
maybe just one addition to that. Sorry if I interrupt. I think what also has to be considered in this regard, at least with Switzerland, I'm not sure with regards to the EU, but in Switzerland, I think Lex Koller, it's called. It's so restrictions on who is even allowed to own property, especially if they come from abroad. So these are all things that you have to consider. How can you ensure that all the investors are eligible or can hold this investment? So I think, as previously mentioned, tokenization of real estate would be really a nice case, but there's certain regulatory and legal challenges that you have to.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. Another question. What is your view on tokenization of traditional financial assets like equity or debt tokenization or funds and portfolios? Is this too early on the regulatory side for Europe?
Maybe I can say a few words like from a business perspective and then you add. So from my perspective, I think when we look now how everything evolves, so we start with really risk-free, let's say, products such as stablecoin, and then we moved on with money market funds, and we see now more and more private debt coming into the picture. So I believe that on-chain, the more on-chain investors we have, they will look for more, let's say, return on-chain, and we will move along the risk curve side. So I believe that, we'll see as we move on and we evolve, we will see more and more risky products on-chain, and hence I think equity will we'll see more equities, I would say, in few years. Also, the market is very efficient. If you look now at the exchanges, so there is a lot of standardization required, also from an infrastructure perspective and how we operate things. If you invest in a security in the US, for example. So I think this is, we will see first other financial instruments being tokenized before we end up with equity. I think also.
I mean, especially the last one, is this too early on the regulatory side for Europe? I don't think so. I mean, we added the share register of a fund, the one that Fatih mentioned before, on-chain. So I think there's a lot of development going on. Also, of course, if you're the first mover, this might be then a bit more work or more interaction with regulators, with other players, with law firms. Just everyone needs to feel comfortable to start. But I think now this phase it's not over in general, but I think we moved on, and I think, I mean, we know for Luxembourg there's a lot of movement going on also on the regulatory and regulator side. CSSF is quite open. I think there's I don't think we're too early. I think that's coming, and there's a lot of work done also in the background, lots of projects. I think this is coming.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think these were all questions that were asked in the chat. If there are none anymore, I would like to...
Sorry, I think one last one with regards to minimum investment amount for investors into tokenized assets like the Picasso or other of our projects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So in the Picasso case, one token was 1,000 Swiss francs. So yeah, but this is then again on us how we want to structure it. For example, for the Hamilton Lane project, we're also able to reduce the minimum investment on on the retail share class also significantly. In the end, I think it's on us to see if it makes sense also from a, let's say, business perspective. If there's demand for, as I said, 1,000 Swiss franc, but we are also you can make it lower or increase. What we have seen so far, I think, in 1,000 Swiss franc was a good, let's say, threshold, but yeah, this can also change. So there is no requirement that we have to fulfill.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe depending on the product, there might be certain financial instruments or certain funds. There could be, with regards to eligible investors, certain minimum thresholds or at least minimum investments. But yeah,
For the Picasso.
not for the
Yeah.
Picasso, no.
Yeah. We had another question popping up in the chat about the presentation. Are you able to share the presentation?
We have to put some disclaimers on it. So did we agree on that already? Or yeah.
We can check afterwards, maybe if that is possible or not.
So if we will share it, then I'm sure you will receive a copy, whoever asked this question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. As we don't have other questions, I would just like to thank you for your time and for sharing all the insights. Super interesting. And yeah.
Thank you very much also for the opportunity, and thanks a lot for all the good questions. It was a pleasure.
Also from my side, big thank you. It was an interesting discussion. And yeah, reach out whoever wants to talk about tokenization or digital assets. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And all the other listeners, we hopefully see each other again in the next BIC in February, which is, I believe, on the 28th or 25th. On the 25th BIC is 25th February is the next BIC. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. Bye.